We asked people in the US military, what's the creepiest, most paranormal thing you've encountered during your service? Midnight Monster is back with another set of stories. Today there are 7 picked hand stories from US military personnel. Let's get right into it. I was working the night shift in an old SCIF that was originally built back in the 50s. I was starting to feel sleepy, so I went for a walk to wake myself up and ended up getting lost in the maze of underground tunnels, finding myself in part of the complex that hadn't been used in decades. Everything looked like it was just left there and forgotten one day, eerily frozen in time. I was extremely tired and stressed out from work, and that did not help me to be able to rationally retrace my steps. Everything around me seemed like something was hiding in the shadows and watching me. It took a long time, but I finally made it back to my position and did not tell anyone what happened. Luckily, it was the night shift and no one noticed I was gone. A year later, we got a new guy, and in the middle of the night, he got up and went for a walk. A couple hours later, he came back looking like he's seen a ghost. I just gave him a nodding nod, and he knew. I knew exactly what he had just gone through. As a Marine, I used to have the graveyard patrol shift at the Beirut bombing memorial. Part of the memorial is dedicated to a veteran cemetery. Oddly enough, I never got freaked out being completely alone in a remote cemetery, in the middle of the night, surrounded by dense woods on all sides. It was actually kind of peaceful, to be honest. However, one night, I was patrolling near the perimeter fence where some of the oldest headstones were, and I heard the sound of a woman humming. I followed the sound and noticed a light glowing through the vines and brush of large trees. As I approached, I could feel my hair beginning to lift as if it was an electric current in the air. I pushed aside the brush, and what I saw nearly took my breath away. It was an old, weathered headstone with a large cross etched into marble. Only the cross was glowing a bright, vivid blue like a neon light bulb. The humming was also suddenly much louder and had a weird plurality to it, like it was coming from hundreds of voices at once. Needless to say, I freaked the fuck out. I screamed like a scared little girl and sprinted back to the parking lot. I radioed the guard who was supposed to relieve me and forced him to come early. Then spent the rest of my shift in the cab of his truck. I don't think he believed me, but he stayed in his truck and did not go on patrol until the sun was fully up. A few days later, I worked up the nerve to return to the grave. During the day, of course. As I suspected, in the light of day, it was completely mundane headstone. There was no name, only the aforementioned cross. I ran my hands over the stone and checked to see if maybe there was some sort of hidden light source or solar panel. Nope. It was just plain, solid, unremarkable stone. The humming was gone too. I eventually returned to my normal shift, but never again experienced anything out of the ordinary. I never learned whose grave that was either, but I find myself thinking about it from time to time. It certainly sounds absurd when it's said out loud, and I suppose it could have been a hallucination or a trick on my tired brain. But I don't believe it was. I think it was real, a ghost or spirit of some sort, but I don't think it was malevolent at all. I was by myself in the engine room of a submarine in the midwatch, just a newly reported sailor trying to find equipment so I could display knowledge to one of the watchstanders. There are several bays in the engine room lower level with narrow passages that pass through the center. I came down one of the ladders and swore I saw someone walk across the ship about 15 feet in front of me. I could hear his footsteps as he walked around the corner and out of sight. 3 problems. Number 1, he was wearing utilities, an older light blue blouse and dark navy slacks. Nobody had utilities anymore. They've been phased out 3 years earlier. And number 2, there was only one other person awake in the engine room that late at night, and he was standing at the top of the ladder behind me, waiting for me to be back up and answer his question, of course. And number 3, he wasn't there. I wrote it off as sleep deprivation, but I'll admit it shook me for a while. Fast forward 4 months later, I'd gone out to sea with another submarine at the same type. While I was there, I met a sailor who had previously served on my ship. After a few weeks of standing watch with him, he told me a story of a sailor who had committed suicide while on watch when he served on my ship almost a decade prior. In engine room lower level, in his utilities. I wish I could have gotten the picture and the look off my face. I'm sure it was the definition of disbelief. My dad's story. He served in the Taiwanese Marines as a drill sergeant. Much of the ground in Taiwan saw violence under occupation, and it was rumored his base was built on or near a mass grave. Needless to say, he has a few paranormal stories. Here we go. He had a guy report to him in the morning exhausted but frazzled. The night before, he'd been on guard duty, overlooking the firing range. The targets on the range were a mix of clay and wooden figures, cut and drawn to look like an enemy soldier aiming a rifle at you. According to the guard, when he's been bored out of his mind, staring off into the range, he saw it clear as day one of the clay soldiers warily lay down his rifle and exclaim, "Damn, I'm tired." The guard said he passed out from fright. During the evening, when training was over, the sergeant, for the most part, had the time to themselves. My dad likes to go snake hunting during dusk when the heat was rising from the ground and the snakes come out of their holes. So, one evening he gets out, carrying a bag and a nice long stick and a flashlight. As he was making his way across the field, zigzagging in a search pattern, he found himself getting closer and closer to an old, decrepit outhouse that's been abandoned as it was too far from the main base. As he got within a few yards of it, he was hit with a sudden feeling of apprehension. Something told him going near the outhouse was a bad idea. At that moment, his flashlight, aimed right at the construction, went out. He fiddled with the battery, smacked it, and thought, "Fuck, better get a new battery." Turned around to go back. The moment he turned and faced the main base, the flashlight flickered back on. Great, time to keep hunting. Well, the moment he turned to face the outhouse again, it flickered off once more. Faced the base, flicked on. He did this 2 or 3 times and got the message. Verbally apologizing for intruding, turned and walked calmly back to base. The base itself was surrounded by forests and mountains and natural terrain of Taiwan. One day, a soldier was reported missing. As the day went on, it was clear that he's either deserted or was in serious trouble. A manhunt or rescue team was organized, and most of the base was out searching for the guy as the rain started to come in. As night fell, they called it off and got ready to try again tomorrow. They found him in the morning, huddled in a wet, dark cave, scared, speechless, and out of his mind. No one was sure what he saw to cause him to freak out, and they never found out. They shipped the guy out soon afterward. Finally, during one of his years on base, it was hit by a huge typhoon. Typhoons are pretty regular in Taiwan, especially during the summer, but this one was going to set records. Everyone hunkered down and reinforced the base the best they could and held well. And after days of relentless rain and wind, they emerged to survey the damage. One of the trees on base had been hundreds of years old. It sat on a hill that overlooked the base and so had been on the site of Buddhist shrine set at its roots. Now, the roots twisted and turned into the air. The storm had torn the tree from the ground, and yet the shrine itself was untouched. Even the red silk covering was nothing weighing it down, had not moved an inch despite the winds that had finally torn the great tree from its hill after hundreds of years. The soldiers took this as a sign that despite whatever could be thrown against them, their spirit would remain strong and unmoved. I have to preface this to give context, and I'm tired and on my phone, so this may be messy. I kind of apologize because it's long. At the time, I was working nights in the ammunition storage area, which is fenced off with barbed wire. The whole area is pretty spread out with multiple buildings and large enough that you generally drove around to get to the other buildings. Due to the nature of the job, the buildings are spread out with clear spaces between them. Anyways, the only people in the bomb dump at this night are the roughly 8 or so of us in the shop. One guy in control that night. He was in the other building and we had direct line of sight to him. We called the bat phone. Relevant later. This is summer in SC and about 2 or 3 a.m., so the air was warm and very still, no breeze at all, and We had this break room door open while we watched a movie. We were on flight line support standby and nothing was going on. Now, the rumor was the small building we worked out of was built by German POWs during the war. And I know for a fact that there were some back then. It was small, with the main break room, a small dispatch office through a doorway, and a couple of offices off to the side. There were 2 doors, one is the break room and one is the side of the building and the dispatch office, roughly 20 to 30 feet away from each other. Both had pushed bars on the inside, but only break room door could be opened from the outside, as the dispatch's door external latch was busted and only the internal bar worked. Well, all of us, minus the guy locked down the control building for security, are in the break room, when suddenly, kathunk! Loud as shit from the dispatch door in the next room. It was like someone was rushing through, slamming on the push bar door and swinging it open, then swinging back shut after a couple of seconds with a slam. We look at each other like, what the fuck, and start to check it out. We had mag lights in our crew books, so a few guys grabbed them and sweeped around the building from both directions. Another guy calls the controller on the bat phone, who picked up and denied that he was fucking with us. There was no way he could have messed with us and made it back to his phone in time, let alone done it with us being seen or heard. Anyone with experience knows how sound carries at 3 a.m. in the South Carolina summer. You could hear the beeps from codes being pressed hundreds of yards away. No joke. No way he hoofed it back to the building anywhere near as fast, going through the halls, punching his code, and gets to the phone in time. But the shit that got me was the damned bar. The door simply did not open from the outside, and we all heard the bar get pushed in hard, and the door swung open. And it hung there for a couple seconds and then shut again, and there was no breeze, and had there ever been, it would have blown past us sitting in the front of the door. It's fucking weird. As an aside, there would be a random times that I would go pick up a trailer or something behind one of the other shops at the far end of the bomb dump, and as soon as I stepped out of my truck to do my inventory, I would get a super bad vibe. I'm talking the heebie-jeebies like no other. And as best as I can describe it, it felt like something was right above and behind me, and I just hated being in there. Just seeing anger, rage, and hate, and it would go away about 15 minutes after driving from the building. One night, another driver who had arrived there shortly before I had a trailer and asked if he had a weird feeling there, which sure as shit I did, so I know at least once someone else corroborated it. All of this was on mid-shift, which is about 11 to 7:30 a.m. I heard a few other people's stories about weird shit that would happen at night, but since they aren't my stories, I can't vouch for their veracity. The only other thing that happened to me there was I swear I caught the clear silhouette of a guy walking in the upper field between igloos. As I turned to punch my gate code in the corner of my eye, I distinctly caught the motion of 2 legs and an arm sticking out, like someone mid-stride. When I turned back, it was just an empty field. That one could have just been mine playing tricks, but man, that place was fucking creepy. It's been damn near 15 years, but still gives me chills to think about. I was a camp counselor for a summer camp outside of Boston, Massachusetts one year. Our camp took a field trip to George's Island on Boston Harbor to visit old Fort Warren. Fort Warren was primarily used as a Confederate prison during the Civil War. Anywho, this place has loads of dark and damp corridors, and it's just filled with creepy vibes. I loved it. It was a hot and sunny July day, and our tour guide took us down through a passage that was completely and utterly pitch black. These conditions lasted for maybe 100 feet or so. My group was too young to be left unsupervised, so we had to tie them together and follow a single file against the granite wall. The National Park Rangers who were giving the tour were playing jokes on the kids and scaring them throughout. They were light-hearted jokes, nothing too WTF. Our kids were spooked but enjoyed it. Now comes to the good shit. I was 15, so I was a junior counselor. Juniors got all the grunt work of the summer camp life, haha. So, my senior counselor says to go back through the pass and get the next group, a group of older kids, and tell them to come through since our little ones were clear. I was not digging the idea, but I had no choice. So I began to briskly walk down the black corridor. You have the corner of both ends to exit this stretch, so for most of the corridor you're in complete darkness. I could finally see the faint glow of the daylight at the far end, and right when I felt relieved, a person crossed from the light right to the left very quickly. It was a smaller outline of a person, so I instantly thought it was an older kid from the camp. "Hey! Who is that? Group 7 or 8? No answer. No sound of walking, nothing. The creepy part is, the way the shadow moved to the left would put them right up against the granite wall. So I got instantly sketched out that someone was about to scare the shit out of me. So I veered further right to the corridor to avoid the scare, still convinced that one of my campers was going to jump out. I sloshed through some puddles and almost lost my footing, so I used the right wall of the corridor for support. I get to about the spot where I think the person's lying in wait and almost fall, because there's a doorway on the right side and all my weight was thrown through it, since I was using the wall for support and guidance in the dark. Now, I'm in the doorway for this massive chamber, still pitch black and musty, but I can tell it's huge from the echoes. I get this insanely, quote, "I should not be here" feeling, and bolt toward the corridor to the end of the darkness and into the courtyard where the next 3 groups have assembled. I'm out of breath, shoes soaked and my shirt dirty from rubbing on the walls. My other counselors are all looking at me like I'm nuts, as I'm asking if any of the kids were in there. None of them were. They were all accounted for, and they even told me that no one's gone in after my group, since they were there the whole time waiting for me to come to them. Well, a few minutes later, one of the park rangers come through the tunnel, and I ran up to him and asked him if he or another ranger was in there to scare us or for safety purposes. He looks at me and instantly asks if I heard anything. I say no, but I'm 100% sure I saw someone cross my path from the doorway that leads from the big-ass chamber room. He proceeds to tell me for the most part, his crew avoids that hallways due to the hearing of the voice of the lady in black, and that none of his men were in there. So back through the darkness we go, though this time we have like 40 of our older 11 to 13-year-old kids running up and down the corridor, hooting and hollering, trying to scare everyone. One of them discovered the big chamber room, and soon they were all in there exploring. The rangers were explaining to the groups that the room and corridor's main purpose was during the Civil War, but I noped out of there as fast as I could and rejoined my young campers on the other side. I have no idea what was down in the darkness, but I'm deadly positive it was a woman's silhouette crossing path in the depths of the awesome old fort. I got a few. I grew up in an old Victorian-era boarding house in Iva, South Carolina. Everything about the town, that house, and its surrounding area is just a big fuck creepy. We saw and felt all kinds of weirdness there, but that's only the beginning of my experiences. Hot spots, cold spots, apparitions of men who look like they were dressed in suit and fedora, who was always with a young woman who was wearing a dress, like an old school teacher from when the house used to be a boarding house, and the ghost of the people that had been lynched from an old pecan tree in my backyard. I'm used to seeing some fucked up shit by this point, and that's only part of it. Fast forward to 2014, enlisted in the US Navy and got assigned to TAD to USS Sterrett, in between my A and C schools. I was coming back to the ship one night and I see somebody aloft. That's not right. Nobody's supposed to be aloft at night, but somebody probably got an okay for it somewhere, so whatever. I see them walking around, then I get to the brow and look up, but don't see anybody. Guess they went inside already. Didn't think anything about it. The next morning, we got underway. I went up to the smoke deck late one night on the underway, and on my way there, I see the upper half of the guy's face, and could see coveralls with his second-class crows visible through the porthole window on one of the airlock doors that you go through to go outside. I make eye contact and shuffle over to let him in. He shuffles over too. Okay, I'll open it. Whatever. I open it, look around, and don't see him. He probably went over for another cigarette. I climbed up there and I see some people in the dark, faces occasionally lit by the cherry from the cigarettes, but I don't see the guy. I asked if anybody saw someone come up here because there was a guy that was about to hop through the airlock but did not. I just want to make sure he's okay, you know? Silence. Then they say, "You saw him, huh?" Yeah, dipshit, that's why I ask. Is there a guy up here or what? Do we need to call man overboard? Huh. No. He's dead. Maybe not if we turn the fuck around. No, man. I mean, he hung himself. Really? Shit. Yeah, man. He was a C2R2. That got into a love triangle that went bad. He couldn't deal, so, hey, actually, come over here under the light. Okay. Look up. This light was the one he hung himself from. Sometimes you can see him walking up around at night and you feel a cold spot right here. Fuck me. Anything else I should know? Yeah, let me show you Andrew Sterrett's sword. It'll also shock you through the case no matter how many times you touch it or if you touch some metal beforehand. Fucking cool, dude. Yeah, apparently he killed a kid with it or something. Yeesh. Oh, and you're a sonar tech, right? Yeah, man, I'm on the R-Div right now, but yeah. Okay, go ask Chief Moon about the skid. I think he's in sonar right now anyways. Okay, I'll bite. I head back in and go down to the sonar control. Chief Moon was there and I asked her about the skid. Oh, hell no. That place freaks me the fuck out. Okay, but why? What's the story? I gotta know now. Well, I went down there one time to get pressure readings because I was an STG-1 at the time and I was on duty. I saw a guy standing in the corner back facing the ladder. I asked if he was okay and he did not reply, so I fucking booked. Fuck that shit. I don't even get to go down there at night. Yeah, but it was just somebody fucking with you? It sure as shit wasn't anybody that I recognized at all, so you tell me. Oh, probably not. Yeah, and that's why I stay the fuck out of there. I left after a bit and figured I'd check up on the skid anyway just to see myself. I got down there and when I touched the hatch, I felt the same weirdness as if I was a kid. I went in anyways and cut on the light. Did not see anything, but still felt that something was off. Everybody else that I asked said that it's creepy down there, and if they don't go anywhere near the skid, unless they have to. Anyways, that are a few things that I saw out there. My old ship, USS Princeton, chased a UFO one time off the coast of Baja, and I saw some sort of submerged disc-like thing on sonar once, that at any time we'd go over the shipwrecks, I would get a weird feeling on the smoke deck. Anyways, that's enough for now. I gotta get back to work. Midnight Monster here, and that was 7 stories from people in the US military about the creepiest and most paranormal experiences they've ever been through. If you like this content and you did enjoy the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, press the notification bells, and smash that like button.